الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. I welcome you to the second semester where we're going to talk about removable partial dentures, and we're going to focus in the lab on the removable partial denture in terms of technical steps and types. So in the case where we have patient have lost part of their teeth, we call this a partially edentulous patient. Not all of his teeth is missing. And because we have 32 teeth, both jaws, so we have a combination of teeth that could be missing. We might have 2 teeth here missing, we might have another 2 here, we might have all anterior missing. So many combinations and many types of partially edentulous patients. We're going to talk about this in the lecture called Classification of Edentulous Patients. But in general, when we have lost some of the teeth, one of the options is replacing these teeth. We could either place them with something fixed or removable. The removable prostheses come in 2 forms. These are the main forms. There might be other forms, but the most famous ones are either made out of acrylic, and this is similar to what you had in the denture. So it is acrylic with acrylic teeth and an extra component which we call clasps, made out of wire. We're going to talk about that in a moment. The second type of RPD is made of different material. It's made out of a metal framework, made out of chrome cobalt alloy, and then later on we add to this chrome cobalt in the areas where we have missing teeth, we add the acrylic and the teeth made out of acrylic mainly. So this is called chrome cobalt partial denture. This name comes from the material. There's another name or another way to classify those 2 partial dentures by their purpose. That this we call it a temporary RPD, and this we call it a definitive RPD. We call this temporary meaning that it's not definitive. We might place it in cases where patient still has some more teeth to be extracted, or maybe for aesthetics only. We're not totally replacing the teeth in a durable way. Acrylic itself is not that strong. So whenever we go to the metal, this metal is more durable. This alloy is more durable, and it serves for a longer time. So that's why we usually place it in patients that have finished all the dental treatments that they have. All of the teeth remaining have finished their caries. If any active caries was there, should have been filled. If there were periodontal disease in the teeth remaining, all periodontal disease should be resolved by root planing and following up of oral hygiene instructions and so on. So we call this a definitive removable partial denture. In this semester, we're going to concentrate on in the first 3 to 4 labs on this type, which we call the temporary acrylic partial denture, and it will go with us in steps. We will first learn how to bend wires, and then how to add clasps, and then after that how to finish up the acrylic. And in the part of the acrylic and teeth, it's a bit close to the denture procedure. But if I'm going to take the wire, I need to place, when I'm placing acrylic material, I need to place wires around the teeth to hold the acrylic, because I no longer have the area of the ridge, residual ridge for my support. I'm getting support from part of the ridge where the teeth are missing, and I'm extending to the other side sometimes because I need to have a good base and extend the denture to be stable on the other side. But what holds it in place with the teeth, I might not have any options other than clasps wrapping around the tooth, holding the removable partial denture into place. So to make clasps in general, we use wires. And this is the wire we're using. This is the most famous wire. It's called stainless steel wire, or we have another classification of it is wrought wire. And it's called wrought wire. It has to do with the way it's manufactured. It's manufactured in a way where it is shaped into the form of wires. It's stretched into the wire form during the manufacturing process, and then we get this fixed diameter of the wire at its length, and this is a 0.7, for example, the 7 wire, or diameter 7 for short. So the wire comes ready to make. It's flexible, as you can see. And wrought wires have this ability. They are very flexible and they have a good fatigue resistance. So that means I could bend them many times and not have them fracture or deteriorate in any way. The fatigue forces can come during the wire bending or later on in function when they are around the teeth. So we're going to use this wire and we're going to go through now the steps how to bend wires. And to bend wires we need to learn the basic skills of wire bending, and this is the subject of this lab. It's only basic skills of wire bending. So if I receive a wire, naturally this wire comes in loops because it comes in stored in that way. So you will have it with a curve, but before beginning any work with wires we should straighten them. So when I want to straighten the wire, I want to make it flat and straight. So it is flat but it's not straight. So how do I do that? I need to use instruments. So the instruments that we usually use when dealing with wires, we use pliers and we use cutters. Cutters just to determine the final length of it, but the pliers are the main shaping tool that we use to shape wires. If we look closely at these pliers, we find that they have peaks, these peaks here. And they come in many shapes. We asked you to bring for this lab, and we use it in this lab, that we call loop former. So this is a type of plier that has two peaks. If we look at them in cross section like this, we find that this peak has a circular cross section with some flat area here, while this one, it's almost like a square cross section pyramid. So they are thin, they are smaller at the ends than at the base, but the very base of this plier, in this area we have two squares meeting each other. Okay, cross section like a square shape that have this straight angle, and each part of these pliers have a different function. So this is the one we are using, and we straighten the wire using by fixing first. I fix the end of the wire. I don't want it rotating. Because the wire is very smooth and rounded, it can rotate easily. So if I'm working like this, suddenly it turns and I'm not working in the same direction. So I have to maintain the direction of the wire. So how do I do that? By fixing the wire at one end to determine the direction I'm going to work with. Okay, so I'm fixing it with a plier. I'm fixing the location. And I want to straighten it. I could use it with gentle finger pressure in the opposite direction of the bend. So the wire was bent in the direction away from me, so I'm bending now towards me in a minor and concentrated manner. Whenever I have a straight part, I go and move and straighten the other part. Okay, I observe the direction. I make sure I'm bending exactly against the same direction. So I keep making sure I'm fixing the wire in the correct direction. So as much as possible, I try to straighten the wire before beginning my wire bending. Another skill that we need during the bending is having what we call a fixed point, because while I'm working, the wire keeps rotating. So it's good at the beginning to make sure that I have a point where I compare with to make sure that my wire is straight or not. So I keep comparing with one direction, okay, and this is my point of fixation, and I begin working towards it. Then, while working with wires, you will notice that to cut the wires, they are like sharp needles. They are very sharp. So it is wise that before beginning the work, and we will provide you with some diamond discs on the main handpiece, where you can trim the sharp edges of the metal of the wire, so it will not injure you, or you will not have a stick injury. Also, for safety issues during using the cutter, as long as we're talking about safety now, while working with the cutters are designed to be like a wedge. So they pierce inside to the alloy And once they cut, they will go inside in a manner that the wire can go suddenly away from each other. Now the small piece of this wire, once it's separated in this sudden motion by the wedges of the cutter, it might fly away. So that means it might pose some danger on you and the colleague or the colleagues sitting around you. So it's very important when you use the cutter that you, once you have put a mark, for example, that I want to cut here, for example, you mark the area that you want to cut, and once you place the peaks of or the edges of the cutter on the mark that you have put, make sure that you protect the cutted head with a hand. Just wrap it around or cut beneath the table. You can go below the table and try to do the cut. And as another safety measure, that while you're doing or working with wires in your lab, it's better to have goggles on. So have some glasses, goggles on, in case that you have any flying objects around while cutting the wire. But as I told you, the best safety is to protect, while you're cutting any wire, protect it with your hand and go beneath the table when you cut. So this is much safer. Okay, so the wire is straight now and I want to begin bending. So what are the main ways to bend? We use our pliers to bend the wire. And once I want to bend any wire, I bend it away from my body. So suppose I'm going to begin bending here. Notice that while I'm working, I'm always orienting my vision that this stays in the same way, in the same direction. So suppose I'm going to bend in this direction or any direction, I am always using this as my orientation. Where is the wire heading? To make sure that I'm always bending in the same direction. So I hold the wire perpendicular to the pliers. Okay, so it's not like this. I don't bend like this, not like this. Sorry. It should be perpendicular. Okay. The second rule is that I should be away from the peaks. So I try not to bend in the last 2 to 3 millimeters of the pliers. I go closer to the middle because I need to make sure that the diameter of the wire is smaller than the diameter of the cross section of the peaks. So I don't want to ruin my pliers. The best strength I get is around the middle part. And when I bend using my finger. So it's not the plier that's bending, it's my finger pressing against the plier. So I usually, when I want to bend, I press away from my body. So if I'm going to bend here, I'm going to bend in this direction. So I hold it. Make sure this is in the same direction I'm bending. It's not downwards, it's not upwards, it's in the same direction, perpendicular. Okay, and I begin holding it firmly and then begin bending. So it's firm pressure from my finger. Now, if I bend against this peak, which has an angle to it, the result would be an angle. If I bend with the round section against the direction that I'm bending, like I'm orienting back in this direction and keeping it in the same direction, and I'm bending in this way around the round part of the peak, what I got is a round angle. So this, it's closer to a loop. So this is the peak that has sharp angles will give me sharp angles. The round one will give me curves depending on the pressure that I press. So these are the parts of the plier and how I bend against them. But there is another part of the plier The last part of the plier is around the base of the peaks. You can see that when I open them, this is like a rectangle and this is a rectangle or square, close to a square. So if I put my my wire in this part of the player and bend, I will get 90 degrees angle. So I get an angle, and if I press it completely towards the player firmly using my finger, I'll get this 90 degrees. So the direction the location where I'm bending the wire will determine the angle that I get when I'm bending. So for our training purposes, we have this piece of paper for training. We're going to let you bend curves and angles. So this one we have angles, and here we have curves. So how do we bend angles and curves? Basically, angles are easier. So simply we just, when we locate the angle that we want, we simply just press against the straight part of the player, and we will immediately get a 90 degrees in this direction. But suppose I want less than 90 degrees. This angle that we're drawing or following is less than 90 degrees. How do I get less than 90 degrees? After I bent the first 90 degrees, I move the angle away. So after I bent the 90 degrees, the first 90 degrees, I go around this part of the player. I take the angle a bit away from the edge of the player. It's only 1 to 2 millimeters away, and I continue bending. So I'm trying to fix the direction. Notice how it rotates. This is the idea that I told you about. It keeps rotating, so sometimes you need to hold it from here, so to make sure that I'm oriented correctly. So once I have a good grip, so it's now stable, it's not moving around, I could further bend it. Okay, I'm fixing from far away, and I further bend this. I increase the bend. So what do I get? I get less than 90 degrees. So this is the way. Okay, so this is how we do angles. Now, how do we do curves? These are a bit more tricky. Okay, a curve is actually minute tiny bends in the wire. So if I want to do a curve, of course I'm going to use this round part. So I'm orienting this, I'm keeping it into place, I make sure that it's in the direction I want to bend. The wire is in 90 degrees with the peaks. I use my finger to begin bending. But actually I do not bend a complete bend. I just bend slowly in a slight amount. I move a bit and bend, move a bit and bend, move a bit and bend. This bending creates the curve. Okay, so I create this by a small bend here, a small bend here, a small bend here, a small bend here, and so on until I finish. Okay, if I want to make it smaller, I go back to the beginning and bend even more. So suppose I want to make this smaller. Okay, this curve, I want it smaller. So I bend further, I bend more, I bend more. I begin bending more in the same direction of the bend. So you can see it even getting smaller as I'm going around it. Try to fix it from here, not to have it rotate. And I'm getting it smaller. Okay, so this is how I get curves. Okay, how do I open curves? Suppose this was too small. I don't want this much. I want it less. So I just reverse this and put the curve that I want to open in the flat area in the lower base part and just press against it. And what you find that the two straight angles of the peaks will begin to straighten up the curve that goes in between them. And then I begin pressing as much as I like. So this is a small opening. I opened it a bit. You see that the circle has opened. Even I could go further and open it more. So I go and put the curve in between the straight peaks, and there it will open up the curve that I had. Okay, so I could open up the curves. If I don't want them, I just put them perpendicular into the straight part of the peak. So I have reduced the curve here. Okay, now I want to do this. I want to follow this one or this one. No matter what I want to follow or I want to do, I have to begin with a straight wire. So I'm going to straighten everything up. I'm bending against the direction that it was bent previously. Once I get it almost straight, any bends that I had, I straighten them with the peaks, the base of the peaks, sorry. Okay, and once it's straight, I begin working. So I want to follow this. So when I want to follow a drawing, I have to have a marker with me that can put a mark on the wire. If you look closely, I would see a mark here. So it's very good to have a marker, a wet pen, pen with the marker in it, where it can write on the wire. So I put a marker where I want to begin my bend. This is where I want to do the bend. I fix the angle here. Notice the angle. I fix it between my fingers. I work usually with a small wire. And then I begin bending in the direction that I want. What do I want? I want a 90 degrees. Okay, so I create 90 degrees. I could use it here or here. I use the straight peaks where I'm going to create the angle. I keep the mark outside because this is where I want it. And then I press with my finger firmly against the wire. So now what I get this angle. If I want to make it smaller, I can increase. Yes, I need to make it a bit smaller, a bit sharper. So I use the upper part where I press it. And now I have this angle. Okay. Now I want to do the curves. So now I begin curving. The first part is straight. I make sure it's straight. So up to here, it's almost straight. And then I put with my marker where the curves begin. So this is the straight part up here. And then I need to begin curving. And preserving the direction of the curve. I want this in opposite to the angle that I've done. I put this is the direction I want to bend. I put the loop in the direction where I want to bend, and I begin creating small bends around the wire. Okay, small bends. And then I begin comparing the curve that I created with the curve. Anything that goes not becoming flat, I put it back to become flat. And I begin bending. And I compare the curve that was created with the curve that is on the drawing. Okay. I find that this is still open. I need more curves. So I go back in the same direction. I curve. I increase the curve. So you can notice that it's easier for me to bend away from my body. So I orient it in a way where the wire is heading away from my body, and it's 90 degrees towards the peaks. Whatever I need to open, I open up the curves if they're excessive, and I increase the curves where I need them more. And then begin comparing this with the drawing here. Each time I compare, I could say I need it to open. So what did I see? I see this curve is smaller than this one. So I need to open here, and then recurve on the other ends. So simply I go and open a curve. This is where I need it open more. Okay, it's open enough. So I need to open it a bit here and then begin curving around here. Make sure the orientation of everything is in the same direction to make it flat on the table. Okay, and I need to open a bit this curve. It's a bit excessive, just a bit. And then begin curving in the lower part. And so on. And I keep following the drawing, and wherever I have gone, I'm on the drawing, I keep it. Wherever I've gone away from the drawing, I put it back into location. To make sure it's flat. Okay. Now I need to bend away from the curve. There is a small bit where I need to open here. Okay. And now I need to bend away with a 90 degrees. And it's almost here when I need to bend. Okay. So I'm going to close it a bit here. Flat. And then bend 90 degrees. Now because I want to bend an angle, I put it, the mark on the peaks, the straight angle peak, and then bend away with a 90 degrees. And then make sure that everything is oriented flat with the paper in case it's not flat. So I go back and reorient it, and I continue my bending likewise. I continue putting another mark and bending, putting marks and keeping bending until I reach the end of the figure. And then I also need to do this. So how you will be marked at the end of the work, we will simply put the work on the paper. So if it is flat, 100%, angles are sharp, and you have preserved the length of the wire bending, you will get a full mark. Any point lost from these, you will be deducted half a mark for each lost point of on the drawing. So the mark will be out of 2. For this lab, we are going to work till the end of the lab, and you're going to submit the work, and you will be free to go once you've finished. Make sure that you have both wires fixed using a tape. You will take it from the inside lab. Thank you.